Oh, it's working.
Yes,
Fabulous.
it is. I'm
So
going
you guys
to
can hear
let
us in the
Steve
back?
go first because he actually prepared and read through the materials.
Because he's, what, you're teaching 20 classes at this thing?
My brain is full.
All right, so here's the deal with tiered permitting. They give us 4 hours to do this class, but we really need 8. It's a complicated subject matter. What we've tried to do to pare it down to the 4 hours is we don't talk about a lot of the background stuff for this. So how many people in here are inspectors?
Yow.
Okay, good. How many people here from industry? Got a fair number of those. This is excellent for you guys. We expect you guys for this class to have a basic knowledge on what hazardous waste is. And we also expect you to have some knowledge on what recycling and recycling rules are, because it does come into play for tiered permitting. But we're not going to cover those subject matters. Also, requirements for like large quantity generators, stuff like that. We're going to try to just focus on tiered permitting.
Yeah, and the more comfortable you are with waste characterization, the easier tiered permitting is. Because what kind of waste does tiered permitting apply to? Hazardous waste.
All right, so you guys have a manual. Also, if there weren't already in the back, I believe they got the evaluation forms. We're going to do an exercise for this class, kind of give you guys some hands-on. When you actually start doing this stuff, it's pretty interesting. So we're going to try to give you guys some good experience, so when you walk away from this class, you'll be able, if you're at a facility, to make a determination if you are doing treatment, and if you're an inspector, how to go out to a facility and attack a facility, inspect them for tiered permitting. All right.
All right.
Let's go.
All right. That's us. Contact information.
And, you know, if there's questions, you can email us. Our emails are there. We can get back to you. It's difficult for us to answer everything up here on the fly, but we can definitely get back to you guys.
Yeah, very often we'll defer it later. With any luck, everyone will forget about it, and then we'll adjourn class. You guys remember some of the conferences over the last couple of years when the fire department showed up out in front after the Fun with Chemistry class? It is kind of fun. All right.
All right. So the outline is block 1. We're going to do a big picture, just kind of starting with the basics of what treatment is. And block 2, we get into the meat and potatoes of, you know, what really goes on in tiered permitting. 3, we get into the inspection, special issues, and situations. We got a lot of really good pictures. Steve, over the years, has collected photographs. And so instead of just a bunch of words up there, we can show you guys what it's like out there in the real world, what we run across. So those are good. And then the last block is really a reinforcement wrap-up. Highly recommend that you guys hang on to this package. It is a great reference. Everything that you need to find on tiered permitting is in the package. And the regulations and laws on tiered permitting are scattered all over the place. So if you're trying to find it, it's no concise location except in your manual.
You bet. And it serves as a handy tea coaster. Okay, but what do you guys expect? I mean, we've been doing this class for a lot of years.
10 years.
10. I thought it was like 11. It seems like 11. It's only 10?
I believe it's 10 years.
A decade.
Yes.
And so clearly your evaluations have had no impact. All right. There's the dread triad of discontent. What do you need? What do you want? What do you expect? And like you want a good, fast, or cheap. You could have any two, but not all three. This is your class. You know, the more that you participate, you know, the better it is. If you do have questions, you know, fire them over. You know, and be specific. I mean, what we typically get are a lot of questions on very specific scenarios, and yes, we will try and use those as, as learning tools, but don't just sit there like a lump. And remember from the evaluations, when you dive out of here for lunch before noon, remember there's a couple of different evaluations. The overall conference one, which you turn in to get a little ticket, and they draw for fabulous door prizes like another laser pointer. And the evaluations for this course. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, we're sorry. But if you have any comments, be specific. Just real specific, because it doesn't seem like it, but we do read them and we.
Well, actually, it gets changed every year, including this year. We, put this whole package together, but every year we have to pull it out. There was a couple modifications to the flow chart for tier permitting, so we had to make updates for the new flow chart. We got new pictures. Some of them became dated. So,
I think I still have the Saddam Hussein picture in there. Anyway, so we talked about this. The prerequisites are important. And if you're not comfortable with waste classification, hazardous waste tank systems, that's going to be a challenge for you.
All right, so block 1, what are we doing? Is it a waste? Am I doing anything to it? Is it a hazardous waste? Is the treatment that I'm doing regulated? Is what I'm doing considered treatment? Kind of just taking and going across and then.
Go this way.
Yes. What specific kind of hazardous waste is? Is it regulated? Is it treatment or recycling? And is the specific treatment combo eligible for tier permitting? So I got some great examples, stuff that just sounds normal, but you can't do it under tiered permitting. So it's very important. Tiered permitting is limited to what they outlined. Anything outside of that is not tiered permitting.
Though it may not seem fair, that's the way it is. And don't forget, this is California. What activities no sane person would consider treatment, it's considered treatment in California. The trick is it regulated treatment? And if it is a treatment subject to tiered permitting? And that's what we're going to be going all through.
So why do I care? Your job as an inspector or a regulator or regulatee, make sure that you fully understand these questions. So we're going to try to take the time to explain it in a manner that's understandable. Are you confident with the answers? Can you back up, document the answers? And that's a key thing. If an inspector goes out there, are you going to be able to show to them what you're doing? So you have to be able to document it. It's not just knowing the answer, but understanding the process of how the answer was found. I know as hazardous waste generator, you're allowed to use knowledge to make a waste determination. Under tiered permitting, you can't use knowledge. You actually have to do some analysis. So you really have to understand the process. You don't want to look like this. Poor Burrow Bob.
No, you don't. And what are the odds that burrow happens to be right around where somebody has a digital camera? What are the odds? But first things first. Because we're talking about hazardous waste tiered permitting, and we usually have a screen here in front of us, so you don't have to keep turning around. Any chemical, physical, biological treatment of a hazardous waste requires a permit or some other grant of authorization, along with storage and disposal, and whether it's on or off site. All we're talking about in here is on-site treatment of a hazardous waste. Now, what kind of site? The generator site, right? That's what we're talking about. In the federal world, there's huge, broad exemptions for on-site hazardous waste treatment in the federal world. Big, huge exemptions. Remember, the federal law, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, back when it was first passed, kind of sort of didn't really regulate much stuff at all. And EPA had to be actually sued back in '77 to get the regulations out to actually regulate hazardous waste. There's a lot of huge exemptions. EPA wants no roadblocks, essentially, for folks to be able to treat their hazardous waste. Not the case here in California. And there's I'd say lots, but it's not really lots, but there's a number of narrow DTSC exemptions for treating non-RCRA hazardous waste. And we're going to go through those. Can DTSC or you, the Unified Program Agency, authorize the treatment of a RCRA waste? Only if EPA excludes it or exempts it from a treatment permit. So we're going to cover those as well. So yes, you can, for certain waste streams, certain types of treatment, they're pretty broad, but we're going to be going through those. And because of the problem with every single bit of treatment needing a permit, way back when, maybe 1772, first established the 5-tier system. And we're going to be going through the 3 lowest tiers.
All right, so tiered permit. Important, standardized and full permit, not part of the tiered permitting program. That's covered by DTSC. Those are the highest level of treatment at a facility. Full permit is if it's a recre waste. If it's not a recre waste and it doesn't fall under tiered permitting, it's a standardized permit. Okay, so those covered by DTSC. Then as we get down below, these are the ones that are covered by the CUPAs. The permit by rule, and then a lower tier would be conditionally authorization, and then the lowest tier is conditionally exempt, which there's 4 different categories under conditionally exempt. So PBR, CA, CE apply to on-site treatment of on-site generated waste. That's a key. You might want to make a little mark in your book there. If it doesn't fall into that, it's probably going to end up here at the top.
And as Steve mentioned, the requirements for tiered permitting are found both in the Cal Code of Regulations and in the Health and Safety Code. And you have to go flipping back and forth, and there's kind of no rhyme or reason for it. It is what it is. So again, for tiered permitting, if it falls under tiered permitting, it's hazardous waste treatment. But for tiered permitting to apply, we don't want to seem like we're beating this thing to death here, but well, wait, we can't use violent terms. We don't mean to be rude to the topic, but we still get a lot of questions on this. People call up and say, hey, I've got this wash water, and it goes into the sump, and I have the waste hauler pump, the hazardous waste hauler pump out the sump, the residue, every couple of months, I have to get a tiered permit for it. It's like, what are you treating? It's, well, they're pulling out a hazardous waste. No, what's going in? It's water with a little oil sheen on it, the dread sheen. There's water with a sheen on it going in. Well, is that hazardous? No. Well, then you're not doing hazardous waste treatment. You don't need a tiered permit, no matter what's getting pulled out of that sump after treatment. So the questions still come up. But for tiered permit to apply, it has to be first a waste. And where do you guys learn about what a waste versus a non-waste is? Hazardous waste characterization class. And we'll talk very briefly about it. But the waste, it has to be a waste. The waste has to be hazardous. And it's being treated in a manner that's, again, exempt from federal or RCRA treatment permit requirements. As Steve mentioned, the other Steve, covered or listed on the tiered permit flow chart, and not otherwise exempt from tiered permit requirements. And we're going to go through all that in the flow. One thing to keep in mind, tiered permitting does not apply to anything done with processed material. Why not? It's not a waste. Anything that's listed as exempt treatment, why not? It's exempt. You've been in class before. Anything that's not covered on the flow chart. Why? Because it's not on the flow chart. Correct. If it's not on the flow chart, it's not allowed. Aside from cyanide treatment, when's the last time that tiered permit flow chart was gone through and updated?
Or added to.
Or added to. Years and years. There's all kinds of new treatment out there, all kinds of cool ways to treat the waste, but if it's not on the flow chart, you're out of luck. All right, so from the agency standpoint, when you start reviewing tiered permit applications, the first questions in your process should be, is this stuff a waste? Because who's completing the tiered permit applications? The facility, the facility's consultant, which you don't need a consultant to do this. You don't. For you facility folks, don't waste your money on consultants to do that. You just ain't that tough. It's really not. All right? But a lot of folks aren't real familiar with what is a hazardous waste or not. Right? Or they may not be doing the proper waste characterization. They may not be doing representative sampling. Bless you. They may not be doing representative sampling. So, remember, there's a lot of detail that goes into determining whether that crud is a waste or not. Including point of generation. What's the point of generation? Sampling or either statistical sampling or some other representative sampling. Doing the right kind of lab analyses if you're using a lab to analyze it. If you do use knowledge of the waste or the process, how documented is that, or how supported is that? You know, did they capture all the right processes feeding into that treatment unit? So there's a lot of information that goes into preparing that tiered permit application, as we're going to see. You know, think of it like a funnel. All this information, all this data, all these, you know, data points that kind of get reviewed and read and funneled down into filling out the little form and checking a couple of boxes. Right? So your first activity should be really trying to decide, did they properly characterize this stuff as a representative waste? And your second and third questions, okay, well, if they say, you know, during your inspection or, you know, based on your questions, if you find out that some of the stuff is considered not a waste, how has that been proven? Again, documentation, you know, and the backup. And is there, as mentioned, is there sufficient representative documentation? And again, the other classes go through that in much more detail. You know, and you from the agencies know, you know, all that information has to be supported. And for you facility folks who are putting together your applications, the more documentation, the more supporting information you have, the easier it's going to be. And the more accurate you're going to be. All right, so you decide, fine, it's a waste. You made your proper decision, it's a waste. And again, tiered permitting only applies to hazardous waste, but not all hazardous waste. And remember the waste types. Right in the RCRA world, you have ignitable, corrosive, reactive, and toxic. See, I've been doing APSA so long, I forget the basic hazards. How I long to have a corrosive waste. And listed. See. And listed. And then in the non-RCRA world, we have extremely hazardous waste, universal waste, special waste. So you do need to know from the folks putting together the application and for the UPA folks who are reviewing the application, you need to know specifically what kind of waste are being treated, where they come from. You want to get process flow diagrams for that generating process, and that's one of the things that we're going to go through. That's one of the things that you're going to be reviewing when you're on site. You're going to go upstream to the point of generation, verify that that's the appropriate point of generation, and you're going to walk that process down, just to make sure there's not other stuff getting in there, just to make sure that the application information that you have is accurate. And why it's important to know specifically what wastes are being treated is critical for whether or not it falls on the flow chart. What's tiered permitting and what tier somebody falls into? What's that based on? It's based on three things. The volume of the waste being treated. Concentration or the hazard, basically the type of waste being treated. And what else? I got to watch the fingers. So the volume being treated, the type of waste, and the manner in which it's being treated. You need to know all those things. Okay. And again, proof and documentation. And again, why is it important? We just covered this. You know, what tier somebody falls under depends on what kind of waste it is and the volume. And sometimes it's the concentration going in. Sometimes it's the concentration coming out. How do you know which one it's supposed to be? It's on the flow chart. And we're going to go through examples of that. And again, you need to assure that if it is a RCRA waste, that they fall under the appropriate RCRA exemption for it to fall under, so forth. And, you know, going through a waste characterization class or waste classification class, sometimes it's not that easy to figure out if it's a RCRA waste or not, because of all those weird, tweaky recycling exclusions in the federal world. You know, I don't think they're as complicated as, you know, 252. See, I don't even know the hazardous waste codes anymore. 25.143.2. I know 252.70s, but anyway, you know, those are pretty complicated. But you know, for example, I overheard a conversation yesterday. Somebody was saying that there was some CUPA somewhere that was telling one of their regulated folks that the baghouse filters from the air filtration system that had some toxic metal in it that they're sending off to be reclaimed was a RCRA hazardous waste. And it's not. It's a characteristic sludge being reclaimed. You know, so there's all kinds of weird definitions in the federal world that you may need to, you know, get yourself caught up on to determine whether or not it's a RCRA waste or not. And if you're unsure, who's responsible for making that waste determination? The generator, right? You can always go back and ask for additional documentation. And there's a couple of other related issues that are going to become important. Conditionally non-hazardous waste, which is, what's an example of a conditionally non-hazardous waste? How about an empty drum? Are empty drums a hazardous waste? They can be, right? You have a drum, it's got stuff in it, you empty out all the stuff, no more pourable stuff in it, right? Slap an empty label on it, put the date on it. What do you have to do with that drum within a year? Recycle it, reclaim it, refill it, then it's not a hazardous waste. What happens if you crush it and recycle the crushed drum? It's still not a hazardous waste because it's being recycled. What if you crush it, chuck it in the trash? Oh, now it's a hazardous waste. Now it needs tiered permitting. So some of these conditionally non-hazardous waste, part of your evaluation is going to be, do they meet the conditions of the whatever exclusion, either before treatment or after treatment? And some other issues which we're going to talk about, we're not going to talk so much about the initial point of generation, but that is going to be critical. And I think they cover that in the advanced hazardous waste class. They go through a lot of effort talking about, have they had that class yet? Tomorrow they're going to cover point of generation in a fair amount of detail. And that becomes important because that's the point at which the stuff may become hazardous, or that's where you make the determination. And then, of course, there's dilution and the mixture rule. We're going to touch on that a little bit as we go through.
All right. So are there ineligible waste? Stuff generated from an off-site generator. Remember, this is on-site generated waste. So if you have material that you're receiving off-site and treating it, it's not going to fall under tiered permitting. So remote site consolidation is okay because you're following basically generator rules to bring the waste on site. So that's an example of waste that you would be able to bring from off-site. Reactive waste and extremely hazardous waste are not allowed to be treated under tiered permitting. So we kick it up into what permit? If it's not tiered, where does it go? Standardized or full Part B, if it's RCRA. They changed the ruling in 2008, and they now allow cyanides, which are an extremely hazardous waste, to be treated under PBR. So that is the one exemption or exception to treating the reactive and extremely hazardous waste.
How many of you guys have cyanide treatment facilities in your jurisdiction, Berg? Okay.
Yeah, those were all done in the past under a consent order with the DTSC. It was burdensome for the DTSC to follow up on those. They wanted to put it into the CUPA program, so they made an exception here, and they brought it under tiered permitting. But you have to understand what reactive waste and extremely hazardous waste are. You should know those definitions. So if you go out to a site and they're doing treatment on anything that falls in that category, under tiered permitting, it's not allowed. The only exception would be the cyanides. Now, a Happy Meal? Was that?
You shouldn't have the second one.
No.
Poor kid. So, all right. So is it treatment? We first went through. Okay, is it a waste? Yeah. Is it hazardous? Yeah. What kind of hazardous waste? Figured that out. The next thing to go through is what's happening to that stuff considered treatment. All right. Now, a couple of things. There's a couple of statutory definitions, and they read like statutory definitions. And we're gonna cover another one later. And man, I don't know who writes these things, but there's Health and Safety Code 251.23.5. Anything that's designed to change the physical, chemical, or biological character or composition of any hazardous waste or material contained therein, or which reduces its harmful properties. Ebola going around? I have sanitizer. You want to gargle up with that, but man, I left my coffee up there too.
We have atomic fireballs. I guarantee the cough will go away.
That will cure anything. That will cure anything. Trust me. All right. But anyway, take a look at that definition. What does that cover? That's pretty darn broad, isn't it? What if you had a hazardous waste, or somebody had a hazardous waste, pH 0.5? Oh, nasty stuff, right? But the treatment facility off-site that'll be receiving it, man, it's half the price if it goes in there at pH 1.5. It's still a corrosive waste. What if the facility kicks in a little neutralizer? They're throwing a little soda ash in there, right? And they knock the pH up from 0.5 to 1.5, manifest that stuff out. Is it the same type of hazardous waste? Yes. Is it manifested the same? Yes. Is it being treated, wherever it's been treated the same? Yes. Is it considered treatment under 251.23.5? Yes. Why? Because it's a harsh definition. Because are you reducing its harmful properties, or I don't know, but you're reducing its character, you're changing its characteristics for a particular purpose. That's very, very broad. May not be fair, may not make a lot of sense in some cases, but that's what it is. And then 251.79.2E, this one's even more generic. Any method, technique, or process that changes the physical character or biological character, or composition of any hazardous waste, and by that change, becomes non-hazardous, less hazardous, more suitable for land disposal because of, removal of undesired properties. That's what kicks drum crushing in. When you crush a drum, you've changed its physical character and reduced its undesirable properties.
Because it's too big.
and it's too big, and it's way too empty inside, much like my head. Right? I have no idea what's happening up here, though.
That's good stuff.
That's just not right.
All right. Treatment versus tiered permit treatment. There's treatment in the Health and Safety Code 25123.5 and 25179E. Very broad, widely applicable, but not all treatment is regulated as needing tiered permit. So we'll go into more details on that. We have specifics. Many activities falling into treatment, as defined above, are exempt or excluded from being regulated as treatment per the Health and Safety Code. So, yeah, it's treatment. One of the things that we really want you to understand is when we talk about treatment, what is treatment? Not just tiered permit treatment. First, you got to decide, is this treatment? If it is, okay, it's treatment, but it may be excluded or exempted. And if it's excluded or exempted, then it doesn't fall under tiered permitting. So,
I'm double cupping.
Yeah, ooh. So let's talk about some examples.
It's time to play. Is it treatment or not? This is the technical version of factor crap. All right, so let's start with the common sense chemistry point of view, because that's the easiest, not what the legislator thinks treatment is. How about neutralization? Anybody think it's not treatment? Excellent. How about flocculation?
That's a
treatment.
Cool word to say.
You want to be careful when you say it, though. Right? You're agglomerating particles, they get heavy, and then they drop out. Precipitation. Yes. How about filtering? Yes. Anybody have a cocktail like that last night at the bowling house?
Those are good. Those are yellow screamers.
Yes, they are. Ion exchange. Sure it is. How about adsorption? How about regenerating the resin? What happens when you regenerate ion exchange resin? What's actually happening from a chemistry point of view? You're moving ions around, aren't you? That's treatment. You say it's not treatment. Why do you say it's not treatment? Because it's exempt. We haven't gotten there yet.
Remember, we're just trying to make you think of things as treatment. Don't think about exemptions or tier permitting. Is this treatment or not?
Yeah, I mean, the way you walk through it is, okay, is it chemistry treatment? Yeah, okay, now let's look for some exemptions. And once you do this for a while, then it's all one big step. You're like, yeah, it's exempt. I don't care what's happening chemically because it's exempt, right?
I think it's important, even on waste determination, not to jump ahead. You do this for a while and then you want to process it quickly. Try to always go back to the beginning. Is it a waste? Is it a hazardous waste? Is it excluded, exempted? So always start at the beginning, do the steps. And then if it falls out at the end, don't just jump to the end, because there's been several times that there were allowances for things that I forgot. And if I had just jumped ahead, I wouldn't have seen those.
Correct. Gravity separation.
Is it changing the physical characteristic?
I mean, there's no chemical interaction, but it's separating because of differences in specific gravity, right? How about seething? It's a physical separation. How about seething? I don't know. Heating. There's a good old boy right there.
Well, that guy.
Actually, wait a second. That's Jack Hanna. No. How about? It's the only biological degradation picture I could find.
Is that treatment? Are they doing something to it? Is it going to change it?
Yeah. It's going to get full.
How about laundering? Well, not as exempted. Is it treatment? They're changing it, right?
Yeah. Saponification. This picture is from our friends down at San Diego County Department of Environmental Health. What the hell is going on there?
So solar evaporation, is that treatment?
Yeah. And as you're writing up the notice of violation for this, you kind of have to give them, a couple of laurels. At least it's in secondary containment.
Except when the wind blows.
Well, that's true.
And then the pipe hits it.
And hopefully the treatment's completed by Friday afternoon because it's the kid's birthday party on Saturday.
How about washing? Okay. Is it very similar to the laundering? How about absorption? Okay. What's the difference between absorption and adsorption? Are they different? Yeah. What's the difference?
Yeah, adsorption is electrochemical attachment. Absorption is something to do with the pineapple under the sea. Just going into pore spaces. How about crushing?
Well, we talked about this one.
Yes, we did. And for extra bonus points, who is this? You have to say it the right way.
The crusher.
What, nobody gets Nickelodeon on their cable? Who gets this job?
Low guy, right?
Yeah, pretty much. How about triple rinsing pesticide containers? Yeah, that's an easy exemption, but rinsing, it's you're physically removing. How about shredding? This is why I have to shop at Costco. Mongo.
Okay, it's treatment, or is it? How about rinsing alkaline cleaners off of parts? If you're just rinsing a cleaner off a part.
Just like getting money. I do the thing with the feet, but I'd fall on my ass.
So would you guys consider that treatment? How about running parts through a rinse tank? Is that treatment?
Now, as we're going through this, I know it's going to come up very shortly, but what's one real big, huge, easy reason why you don't care so much about the first two bullets under tiered permitting? It's part of the process. They're not doing anything with the waste. It's part of the process.
So it's not a waste in these. How about changing pH, let's say it is a waste, changing the pH from 1 to 4.2? That's right. But how about 14 to 12.9?
Well, it depends on why they did it. That's like the acid example we used before, and that's that weird, torquey definition in the health
What
and
was the
safety
purpose of doing it?
code. Yeah. Yes.
First one,
Oh.
you're rinsing alkali off parts that are waste parts that can be thrown away. You're rinsing them off to make them non-hazardous.
Chemically, it's treatment, and I know we're going to come up with the code section, but cleaning of process equipment is exempted.
Yeah.
But
if
yeah,
they were waste parts.
Yeah, but you're getting the sense that just the concept of treatment, of what you're doing chemically, physically, biologically, is hugely broad. You know, is very, very broad. So almost everything is captured into treatment. You know, so but you want to be cautious because sometimes facilities, and no offense to you facility folks, you know, sometimes I know I get all weepy about it too, but you know, some of these facility folks, they don't understand, or they're not aware of that huge broad definition, and they don't think it's treatment what they're doing. So by understanding that, yeah, pretty much everything could be chemical, physical, biological treatment, or changing the characteristics, you know, for any reason, even though it may not change the actual hazard, you know, that helps folks understand, well, it's potentially regulated. Now let's look for the exclusions, or now let's look for the exemptions. Well, it's the treatment in the sense that, you know, rinsing something off of something is a physical change, right? And really right now what we just want you to get is just that broad concept that pretty much anything you do is considered treatment under some legislative or some statutory definition. So now what starts to become important is it part of the process? And that's waste characterization class. But secondly, is the stuff exempt? You know, like crushing drums that are then being sent off for reclamation or recycling. By that act, they're exempt. Crushing oil filters, statutory exemption. Ion exchange resin regeneration, statutory exemption from tiered permitting, or either that or exemption from being considered treatment. All right, so knowing that almost everything's covered, now you know to look for, you know, the specific exemptions that we're going to go through.
How about commingling metal finishing tank solution with a non-hazardous rinse water tank solution? Are you going to change the property? Are you going to change the characterization? You know, the rinse water may be non-hazardous. You may dilute this to where the waste isn't hazardous anymore. Are you changing it? Yeah.
Yeah, dilution may be the solution to pollution, but it needs a permit.
Sorting chunks of steel painted with lead-based paint from lead-based paint sanding waste. Yeah, so you're changing the physical characteristic. Is it allowed, you know, under tier permit? That's another question. But is it treatment? Yes. Is a tier permit required? So that's the question you have to ask on these. Need to really understand what is happening to the waste and why are they doing it. So, you know, it's not just what is happening, but why. What's the purpose of it?
And at what point in the process, or at what point in the train of handling. We're going to go through some examples later when we go through various example processes where different things are happening to one or more waste streams at different points in its life. And that has an impact as to what tier somebody falls under, or whether it's covered treatment at all.
Okay, so how about pouring? Would that be treatment if you're pouring something?
That coffee is... How many guys like Starbucks coffee? It just... Man, it's a little harsh to me. So, while Steve talks, I'm going to enjoy a refilled bottle of water. Is there a cup?
I think we have a cup here.
All right. Oh, man.
Let's see how this water tastes, if it's better.
Yeah, I got to get rid of that coffee taste. No, somebody handed that thing to me. I don't know. Go ahead.
All right. So here we got pouring. What?
God! What tastes like crap. What? That tastes awful.
Did it have kind of a solvent leak?
Yes, it had a solvent taste. It must have been from Superfundaria 6 out there below the ground.
Maybe if we tried this, Steve. I got an idea.
Yeah, hang on. Let me dump this stuff out.
Yeah, we got to get rid of that solventy water. All right.
I'll go drop that off over at NES. Here, you know what? Here, try that.
Thank you. If we go like this.
No, come on. There's a lot of benzene
Wait.
in there. Go higher, higher, higher. Come on.
We got to get it in the cup.
Okay.
Oh,
there we go.
all right. Taste that water now.
Oh, that's much better.
Still have that solvent flavor?
Mm-mm.
Oh, there we go.
That is a tasty beverage.
So is it possible to even make pouring treatment if you're trying to do something? All right. That was overdone, but
That was way overdone. True story. True story. Not a Klein facility, back at a facility I used to work at. In the large wastewater treatment system, there was a little bit of VOCs in the wastewater. And, they're putting in the pipe to go into, actually it was going into a temporary Baker tank before they had the thing hauled out. And, rather than extending that pipe all the way down at the bottom, it kind of was sawed off near the top. We got a lot of bubbling going on. We're putting water in the tank, it just sort of bubbled up and air sparged itself out. That was back in the day. That was before tiered permitting where we were really doing the wrong thing. But again, you look at intent. You look at intent. Same thing in a process line. Same thing in a plating shop or in a circuit board shop. They have a couple of process tanks. They have a boatload of rinse tanks. They have a wastewater treatment system, right? And they're cracking the valves and they're generating all the rinse water that's going into the wastewater treatment system. Not a big deal. That's fine. Most of the rinse waters are not hazardous. Well, they're not hazardous waste. But every now and again they have to change the solutions in the process tank. Well, let's just crack that valve too. Let's do it at the same time we drain all the rinse tanks though, so we don't whack out the treatment system. What are they doing to that process waste? Diluting it. Well, that's part of our process. That's how we normally operate. We change the tanks. And we just open up all the valves and they go in there together and it goes out to waste treatment. What's the problem? Well, why are you doing that? Why don't you just treat the tank that you need to treat? Well, that's too concentrated. We need to dilute it. That's why we crack all the bottom valves. So intent does go into it. The better you understand the process and what's being generated, how is it being generated, at what point on the timeline is it being generated? And ask questions, well, why do you do that instead of something else? Particularly with commingling and mixing, intent does become important.
all right. We killed that slide.
You can't see it, but this guy's making these really good coffee drinks, and it was solid flame going up. That's why he's leaned all the way back.
He had a beard when he started, right?
He did. But that was up in Canada. He was very polite. Oh, yeah. So, if the health and safety code is so broad to include pretty much anything as treatment, how do you get out of stuff? Well, there's various stakeholders, including everybody from DTSC to industry to, you CUPA folks. And, over the years, the legislature has exempted various things. And rather than changing the initial definitions of what is considered treatment, they add, or they modify different sections to the code. 251.23.5 back in 1998 added a couple of exemptions from the definition. Filtering to remove solid fractions without adding heat, chemicals, or pressure when adding to a storage tank or drum. That's the safety clean exemption. Because they were taking solvent wastes back to they were taking solvent wastes, or some of the solvent waste they would generate, and some stuff at customer facilities. And there's bolts and nuts and washers in it, because they're all part of the cleaning tank system. And they just wanted to pour the stuff through a filter, just to filter out the hard stuff. That's not treatment, so there's a statutory exemption. Yeah?
So when you say without adding head, what do you think of beer?
Little early for beer, but I have a fine scotch up here in the hopper. So, phase separation without adding heat or chemicals has to occur in tanks or containers during accumulation, right? So you have a multi-phase liquid, and it's just sitting out there in the waste yard, and it just happens to separate. Well, that's not regulated treatment. It's still a chemical, physical separation, but it's not considered regulated treatment or evaporation of water without adding heat, chemicals, or pressure. And heat doesn't include sunlight or ambient input, right? So you stick a drum of something that has an aqueous phase to it or a water phase to it. That thing gets stuck out there in the waste yard, pop the lid, and the water evaporates, or you sit it out in the sun, and you come back, voila, it's more of a solid. That's not considered treatment either. Anyone see an issue with that? Yeah, if you're evaporating the water, how's it getting out? Through the open container of hazardous waste. May not be regulated treatment, but they're in a world of hurt if that's what's happening and it's a hazardous waste. If it's happening in an accumulation container. Like that.
And how many people have seen stuff like this on inspections? All right, see,
Yeah,
so the real world, we're not making stuff up here.